The kingdom of Eldamaya was not built on peace. It was built on walls. Massive granite ramparts wrapped around the capital like a clenched fist, and beneath those walls lay the royal vault, an underground fortress within a fortress, designed by the greatest minds of 3 generations. It was said that nothing could enter without being seen, nothing could leave without blood being spilled, and nothing could even think about stealing from it without dying in the attempt. That belief lasted exactly until the night the vault went silent. Captain Harold Vance had been on duty for 8 years. He had survived border raids, assassin cults, and a siege that lasted 42 days. He was not the kind of man who believed in panic. Panic was for rookies. Panic got people killed. But standing inside the royal vault at dawn, Harold felt something unfamiliar crawling up his spine. Silence. Not the normal kind. Not the calm after-guard shift silence. This was wrong silence. Heavy. Pressurized. Like the air itself was holding its breath and waiting for permission to exist again. The vault doors were intact. The seals were unbroken. The enchanted locking runes still glowed faintly blue along the archway, pulsing with steady magical rhythm. And yet, "Captain," one of the guards whispered behind him. "Where is everything?" Harold didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved slowly across the chamber. Where there had once been piles of gold bars stacked like miniature mountains, there was now only empty stone. Where royal coffers had stood sealed with iron and enchantment, there was only dust outlines, perfect impressions of what had once been there. Even the pedestals for the kingdom's relics were bare, as if they had never been occupied at all. 10 tons of gold. Gone. The crown of Asteron, an artifact said to have been forged in dragonfire and blessed by ancient kings, gone. The royal scepter of Dawnlight, gone. Not shattered. Not stolen in pieces. Removed. Cleanly. Deliberately. As if the vault itself had been politely emptied. Harold walked forward, boots echoing across the stone floor. Every step felt louder than it should have. He crouched near one of the empty coffers, running gloved fingers across the edge. No scratches. No forced entry marks. No sign of struggle. Magic breach, another guard suggested weakly. Harold shook his head once. If it was magic, the wards would have screamed. The ward stones embedded in the walls were still intact, still glowing steadily. They hadn't triggered. Not once. That was the most terrifying part. Because the vault hadn't been broken into. It had been bypassed. Harold stood slowly, jaw tightening. Checked the ceiling. The guards hesitated. "Sir." "Now." Reluctantly, they raised lanterns upward. The vault ceiling was a vast dome of reinforced stone etched with anti-fly enchantments and detection sigils. Nothing large could pass through without triggering at least 6 separate alarm layers. But as the light swept across the upper arches, one of the guards froze. "Captain." Harold followed the gaze. At first, there was nothing. Just stone and enchantments and shadows. Then, a faint scrape echoed through the vault. Slow. Deliberate. Like claws dragging across stone that wasn't quite there. Harold's hand went to his sword instantly. "Form up." The guards obeyed, forming a tight circle. Lantern light flickered nervously across the vault ceiling. The scrape came again. Closer this time. Something was above them. But nothing should be above them. The vault had no upper chamber. No access. No. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts. A breath. Warm. Slow. Almost curious. Then the darkness above the central vault arch shifted. Not like a door opening. Like reality itself blinking. And for half a second, Harold saw it. An eye. Massive. Golden. Reflective like molten coin. It filled the darkness above them, staring directly down into the vault as if peering through glass rather than stone. The guard stumbled back. "What is that?" someone choked. The eye didn't blink immediately. It studied them. Measured them. And then, slowly, it blinked. Not like a predator preparing to strike. Like something amused. Something entertained. Harold raised his sword slightly, though every instinct in his body screamed that steel would mean nothing here. "Identify yourself." The eye tilted slightly. And in that same instant, the vault temperature rose by a few degrees. A soft glow shimmered in the dark above. And then, it vanished. Just like that. No explosion. No roar. No collapse. Only silence again. But now the silence felt different. It felt watched. One of the guards dropped his lantern. "Captain, what do we tell the king?" Harold stared at the empty vault, at the missing treasures, at the impossible absence of any explanation that made sense in the world he understood. He tightened his grip on his sword. "Tell him," Harold said slowly, "that something has learned how to steal from us without opening a door." A pause. Then, quieter. "And it's coming back." Above them, somewhere beyond stone and magic and reason, something unseen shifted in the dark. And for a fraction of a moment, a soft, delighted sound echoed through the vault. Like laughter. The royal vault incident turned Eldermire into a city that stopped sleeping. By the third night, every lantern on the capital's upper streets burned late into the dark, and every rumor grew teeth. Some said it was a rival kingdom's new invention. Others claimed it was an invisible thief guild blessed by forbidden magic. A few whispered the word no soldier liked to hear in daylight. Dragon. Captain Harold Vance didn't believe in rumors. He believed in patterns. And right now, the pattern was simple. Something had entered a magically sealed structure, bypassed every ward, taken only valuables, and left no trace of entry or exit. That wasn't human. It wasn't even close. So when the king summoned the kingdom's leading arcane specialist, Harold didn't argue. Dr. Elias Grant arrived at the palace 2 days later with ink-stained fingers, 3 satchels of field journals, and the calm expression of a man who had already decided the world was usually wrong. He listened to the report without interrupting. He didn't react to the missing crown of Asteron. He didn't react to the enchanted vault seal still intact. He only asked for sketches of the claw-like scrape marks found in the air above the vault. Then he went quiet. Too quiet. Harold noticed immediately. "You recognize it?" Elias didn't answer at first. He adjusted his spectacles, leaned closer to the sketches, and then slowly exhaled. "That's not a thief," he said. Harold narrowed his eyes. "Then what is it?" Elias tapped the paper once with a trembling finger. "That pattern, that curvature in the scrape marks, it's juvenile emboing." A pause fell over the room. Even the guards shifted uneasily. Harold crossed his arms. "Translate that into something useful." Elias looked up, and for the first time, there was something like concern behind his academic calm. "It means a dragon." The word landed heavy. Not mythical. Not symbolic. Real. Harold had fought men. He had fought beasts. He had even fought things that came out of swamp fog and refused to die properly. But dragons were not something you fought. Dragons were something stories described after everyone who had fought them stopped being alive to argue. "And you're certain?" Harold asked. Elias nodded slowly. "The heat residue in the vault. The precision of removal. The lack of structural damage. It's consistent with a young emboing developing hoarding instincts." "Hoarding," Harold repeated flatly. "Yes." Harold frowned. "Gold?" "Gold. Jewelry. Shiny metals. Reflective objects. Anything that catches light." The silence that followed was different from fear. It was disbelief trying and failing to find purchase. Harold stepped closer. "You're telling me something broke into the royal vault, undetected, just to steal shiny things?" Elias hesitated. "Not just steal." "What else?" A pause. "Collect." That word changed the room. Harold studied him. "There's a difference." Elias nodded slowly. "A thief takes what is useful. A collector takes what is interesting. And this thing," Harold said carefully, "finds the most secure vault in the kingdom interesting." Elias didn't smile. "It would appear so." That night, the palace increased security threefold. Every reflective surface in the treasury was covered. Guards were stationed in overlapping shifts. Magical wards were reinforced until even the air inside the vault felt heavy with defensive enchantments. Harold personally oversaw the ceiling. Nothing enters. Nothing leaves. That was the order. For a while, it held. The second theft didn't happen at the vault. It happened in the king's private gallery. At dawn, a servant discovered that one of the most valuable pieces in the royal collection, a polished silver mirror framed in enchanted oak, was gone. No broken glass. No shattered frame. Just absence. And on the floor beside where it had hung, a single guard's helmet rested neatly, polished to a mirror shine. Harold stood in front of it later that morning, expression unreadable. Elias examined the helmet carefully. "Interesting." "That's your reaction?" Harold asked. Elias adjusted his glasses. "Look at it." Harold did. The helmet wasn't damaged. It wasn't discarded. It was arranged. Centered. As if placed deliberately. "Why leave this behind?" Harold asked. Elias crouched slightly. "Because it's not random." Harold's jaw tightened. "Meaning?" It's communicating. That made Harold pause. Through theft. Elias nodded. Through selection. A servant nearby spoke up nervously. There's more, sir. Harold turned. What now? The servant swallowed. The wall. They followed him to the east corridor. The stone wall near the gallery entrance had always been plain. Unremarkable. Part of the old palace expansion. Now, it had changed. Something had been carved into it. Not violently. Not crudely. Carefully. Harold approached slowly. The markings were smooth, precise grooves burned into the stone as if drawn by heat rather than chisel. They formed a single word. He read it once. Then again. Pretty. Silence fell. Elias stepped closer. That confirms it. Harold didn't look away from the word. Confirms what? Elias spoke quietly. It's not just collecting valuables. A pause. It's choosing things it finds visually appealing. Harold finally turned his head slightly. You're saying the royal vault was hit because it was aesthetically pleasing? Elias hesitated. Yes. For the first time in years, Captain Harold Vance felt something dangerously close to absurdity creeping into his professionalism. So we're being robbed by a creature with taste, Harold said flatly. Elias corrected him gently. A creature with developing taste. Harold exhaled through his nose. Wonderful. A faint sound echoed somewhere above them in the corridor. Soft. Almost like a pleased hum. Both men froze. The sound came again, fainter this time, but unmistakably present. Elias whispered, "Did you hear that?" Harold already had his hand near his sword. Yes. The lanterns flickered once. Then steadied. The sound stopped. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, from somewhere deep within the palace structure, too high to see, too hidden to track, a faint scrape echoed again. Slow. Curious. Searching. Harold's expression hardened. It's inside the palace, he said quietly. Elias didn't argue. Above them, unseen, something watched the glittering heart of Eldermire, and decided what it wanted next. By nightfall, Eldermire was no longer a kingdom, it was a sealed wound. The palace gates were shut tight, iron bars reinforced with lead enchantments that hummed softly like a trapped storm. Patrols doubled. Then doubled again. Every corridor that once felt familiar now carried the tension of something being wrongly occupied, as if the air itself belonged to someone else. Captain Harold Vance stood at the war table with a map of the Ember Ridge spread wide before him. Ink marks showed known cave systems, collapsed tunnels, and ancient lava channels that predated the kingdom itself. Across from him, Dr. Elias Grant traced a circle on the map with a trembling finger. This is where it will be, Elias said. Harold didn't look up. You sound certain. Elias hesitated. I am, statistically confident. That's not comforting. Elias gave a thin, tired exhale. Nothing about this creature is comforting. The king, standing nearby in full ceremonial armor despite no battle being officially declared, leaned forward. You are telling me the thief is hiding in dragon territory? Elias corrected gently. Not a dragon. A juvenile emberwing. Harold finally looked up. Which still means dragon territory. Silence. No one disagreed. The Ember Ridge was not part of Eldermire's mapped dominion in any practical sense. It was a graveyard of volcanic stone and unstable tunnels where even seasoned soldiers disappeared if they walked too far without guidance. The kingdom maintained watchposts along its outer edges, but no one lived there. No one sane, at least. And yet, that was where everything pointed. Harold rolled his shoulders once. We go at dawn. The king frowned. You'll take a full battalion. No, Harold said immediately. The room went still. Elias looked up sharply. Captain, that is not advisable. Harold tapped the map once. Large groups trigger movement. If it's intelligent enough to bypass vault wards, it will notice a marching army long before we arrive. So your solution, Elias said carefully, is to walk into dragon territory with fewer men. Harold met his eyes. My solution is to avoid turning it into a war before we even understand what it is. The king frowned. And if it attacks? Harold didn't hesitate. Then we adapt. That answer did not satisfy anyone. But it was final. They left before sunrise. Harold, Elias, and 6 elite guards chosen not for strength alone but for discipline under pressure. Each man wore muted armor, no polished metal, no reflective surfaces, nothing that could catch light and draw attention. Elias insisted on that part. Anything shiny is invitation, he had said. Harold hadn't argued. By midday, they reached the outer slopes of Ember Ridge. The air changed immediately, warmer, denser, carrying faint traces of sulfur and something older. The land itself looked scorched not by fire, but by memory. Jagged black stone rose like broken teeth from the earth. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. No birds. No insects. Even the wind seemed hesitant. One of the guards whispered, "I don't like this place." Harold didn't look back. No one does. Keep moving. They followed Elias through narrow ravines and collapsed stone arches until the path narrowed into a canyon lit by faint natural glow, crystals embedded in the rock walls reflecting dim blue light. Then they saw it. The first stolen object. A golden goblet. Sitting perfectly upright on a stone ledge like it had been placed for display rather than discarded. Harold raised a hand. The group stopped instantly. Elias stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "It's deliberate." Harold scanned the canyon. "What is?" "The placement." Elias crouched slightly. "It's not scattered. It's curated." Harold exhaled slowly. "Like a collection." Elias nodded once. "Exactly." They continued forward. The canyon widened into a vast hollowed cavern system carved by ancient lava flows. And there, visible even from the entrance, was something that made every guard go still. Artifacts. Not buried. Not hidden. Displayed. Jewels arranged in spirals across stone shelves. Royal weapons lined like ceremonial offerings. Stolen paintings hung carefully against cave walls, somehow preserved despite the heat and dampness. And in the center, a pile. Not chaotic. Not trash. A nest. Harold raised his hand again, signaling silence. They moved forward slowly. Then they saw movement. Something shifted within the nest. A long, slow stretch of scales catching dim light, colors shifting between ember red and molten gold. Not fully grown. Not yet monstrous in size. But undeniably powerful in presence alone. The dragon lifted its head. And looked directly at them. No roar. No attack. Just observation. Harold's grip tightened on his sword. Elias whispered, barely audible, "Don't provoke it." The dragon tilted its head slightly. Then exhaled. Warm air rolled through the cavern, not burning, but alive. Curious. And then it moved. Not toward them. Toward something beside the nest. A newly acquired object dragged into view. A royal officer's coat. Harold froze. The coat was unmistakable. Dark blue fabric trimmed with silver thread, his own regiment's insignia stitched on the collar. It had been taken during the vault incident. The dragon nudged it gently with its snout, almost carefully, as if arranging it just right. Then it paused. And turned its gaze back toward Harold. Recognition. Interest. Something else. Elias whispered, "Captain. I think it knows you." Harold didn't respond. The dragon stepped forward once. Slowly. Deliberately. Not aggressive. Curious. Then it stopped a few paces away and lowered its head slightly, as if evaluating him the same way one might examine a rare object. A faint sound escaped it. Not a growl. Not a hiss. Something softer. Almost, pleased. Harold slowly realized something uncomfortable. It wasn't just guarding its treasure. It was choosing what belonged in it. And right now, it had chosen him. By the time they reached Ember Ridge, the world behind them already felt distant, like a place that belonged to another life. Captain Harold Vance had led men through war before, but this was different. Wars had rules. Enemies had motives. Even chaos, in its own way, followed patterns. This did not. The mountains rose like blackened bones under a pale sky, their surfaces scarred by ancient heat. Ember Ridge was less a location and more a warning left by the world itself. No birds circled here. No insects buzzed. Even the wind felt careful, like it had learned not to disturb what slept beneath the stone. Harold adjusted his grip on his sword as they moved single file along a narrow ridge path. Behind him, 5 elite guards followed in silence. Ahead of them, Dr. Elias Grant kept stopping every few dozen steps to study the ground, the air, even the way loose air shifted underfoot. "You're slowing us down," one of the guards muttered. Elias didn't look back. "And you're still alive. That suggests I'm doing something right." Harold didn't intervene. He trusted Elias more than he liked to admit, and right now, trust was the only thing keeping them moving forward instead of turning back. After the second hour, Elias finally stopped. They had reached a split in the rock formations, a jagged entrance leading deeper into the ridge, where the stone itself seemed to bend inward as if unwilling to reveal what lay beyond. "This is it," Elias said quietly. Harold stepped beside him. "The cave system?" Elias nodded. "Or what's left of it?" One of the guards frowned. "What do you mean, what's left?" Elias pointed at the walls. Up close, the rock wasn't natural anymore. It bore subtle smoothing in places, edges melted and reformed, not by excavation tools but by sustained heat. In some sections, faint claw-like impressions were visible, half eroded but unmistakably deliberate. "This wasn't mined," Elias said. "It was curated." Harold glanced at him. "That word again." Elias gave a short nod. "Because it keeps fitting." They moved inside. The temperature shifted immediately. Warm air wrapped around them like a slow breath. The deeper they went, the more the tunnels opened into natural chambers, each one faintly illuminated by mineral veins glowing under the stone like veins under skin. And then they saw the first object. A silver goblet. It sat perfectly centered on a stone ledge, polished so clean it reflected torchlight like a mirror. One of the guards stiffened. "That's royal property." Harold didn't answer. He was already scanning the chamber. Because it wasn't just the goblet. It was others. A broken necklace carefully reassembled and draped across a rock like a display piece. A ceremonial dagger placed upright in a crack in the stone as if mounted for exhibition. A small framed painting, impossible in this environment, yet untouched by soot or heat, hung against the cave wall as though someone had taken time to nail it there. Elias exhaled slowly. "It's organizing them." Harold frowned. "Why?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He crouched near the goblet and examined the surface without touching it. "Look at the spacing. The symmetry. Nothing is random." "So it's intelligent," Harold said. Elias shook his head slightly. "Not just intelligent. Selective." They moved deeper. The tunnel widened into a massive hollow chamber carved out of the ridge itself. Here, the air was warmer still, carrying faint echoes of distant movement, like something breathing in rhythm with the stone. And in the center of the chamber, the hoard. It wasn't a pile. That was the wrong word. It was a structure. Gold coins laid in spirals. Weapons arranged in radiating arcs. Jewelry threaded through natural stone formations like vines of metal and light. Even the stolen royal artifacts, those thought lost forever, were positioned deliberately, each one displayed as if part of a grand exhibition. Harold felt his stomach tighten. "This isn't storage," he muttered. Elias nodded slowly. "No. It's expression." One of the guards whispered, "Expression of what?" No one answered him. Because something shifted in the hoard. A ripple of movement from the far side of the chamber. Harold raised a hand instantly. The team froze. Then they saw it. A shape rising from within the golden stone. Not massive, not yet, but unmistakably alive in a way that made the air itself feel heavier. The dragon emerged slowly. Its scales shimmered like molten metal cooled just enough to hold shape. Gold and ember-red patterns shifted along its body as it moved, reflecting the cave's glow in fractured waves of light. Its wings remained half-folded, too large for comfort but not yet fully developed, twitching slightly as it adjusted to their presence. It didn't roar. It didn't attack. It simply looked at them. And in that silence, Harold understood something unsettling. This wasn't territorial aggression. It was curiosity. Elias whispered, barely audible, "Don't make sudden movements." The dragon tilted its head. Slowly. Studying them. Then its gaze locked onto Harold. Not the guards. Not Elias. Just him. Harold didn't move. The dragon took one step forward. Then another. No hostility. No warning display. Just deliberate approach, like a creature trying to decide what something was worth. The air warmed slightly as it drew closer. One of the guards whispered, "Captain, it's choosing you." Harold ignored him. The dragon stopped a few paces away. It lowered its head slightly, not in submission, but in evaluation. Its eyes were reflective gold, intelligent in a way that didn't feel natural for something so young. Then it exhaled softly. A sound like satisfaction. As if it had found something it had been looking for. Elias swallowed. "I've never seen that behavior before." Harold kept his voice low. "Neither have I." The dragon shifted its attention briefly, scanning Harold's armor, his coat, the faint glint of his sword. Then, with sudden speed too fast to fully track, it darted forward. Not attacking. Taking. Harold barely reacted in time, stepping back as something tugged sharply at his coat pocket. When he looked down, his pocket watch was gone. One blink. That was all it took. The dragon retreated immediately, curling back slightly into its hoard, examining the stolen watch like a prized object. The guards tensed. Harold raised a hand. Hold. Elias stared. It didn't attack. Harold watched the dragon carefully. No. A pause. It stole. The dragon gave a soft, almost pleased sound, turning the watch over in its claws like it was inspecting a gem. Then it looked back at Harold again. And in that moment, Harold realized the truth was worse than anything they had assumed. It wasn't just collecting treasure. It was collecting preferences. And right now, he was on the list. The Royal Council chamber had survived invasions, assassinations, and one particularly memorable incident involving a collapsing chandelier and a panicked duke. It had never, however, been prepared for what walked through its doors that morning. Captain Harold Vance stepped inside first. That alone was enough to quiet the room. He was usually the bearer of bad news, and nobody liked bad news arriving in person. Behind him stood Dr. Elias Grant, visibly exhausted, hair slightly disheveled, carrying the expression of a man who had stopped arguing with reality because reality had stopped behaving predictably. And then came the third presence. A low, shifting warmth in the air. Claws clicked gently against polished marble. The dragon entered. Not bursting in. Not crashing. Not destroying anything on the way through. It simply walked in as if it had always belonged there. Which, unfortunately, made the silence even worse. The council froze. One advisor dropped a quill. Somewhere in the back, a guard made a sound like he was reconsidering every life decision that led him to this exact moment. The dragon paused just inside the chamber. Its head tilted slightly. It was observing the room. Not as a threat assessment. As an inventory. Gold trim on chairs. Silver inlays in the table. Jewelry on noble hands. The faint shimmer of enchanted crowns. Its tail flicked once. Harold noticed immediately. Don't, he said quietly without looking back. Elias whispered, don't what? Spark its interest. Too late. The dragon's gaze locked onto the king's ornate crown. A pause. A decision. And then, it moved. Too fast for anyone to react properly. A flash of embergold motion, a startled shout from the king. And the crown was gone. The dragon had already retreated 3 steps back, holding it delicately in its claws like a prized trinket. The king stood frozen, bareheaded, blinking in disbelief. Did it just? The king began. Yes, Harold said flatly. Elias rubbed his forehead. It did. The dragon examined the crown carefully. It rotated it, studied the gemstones, then gave a soft, approving sound. It placed it beside Harold. Very deliberately. Not on the floor. Not discarded. Offered. The room went dead silent. Harold stared at the crown on the ground beside him. Then at the dragon. That's not mine. The dragon made a small sound. Almost offended. Then nudged the crown closer to him. Elias whispered, I think it disagrees. The king finally recovered his voice. Captain Vance, explain. Harold exhaled slowly. It keeps taking valuables. Yes, the king snapped. I noticed. Harold continued, but it doesn't consume them. It arranges them. It selects them. And, he hesitated, glancing sideways at the dragon, it appears to associate value with preference. The dragon gave a small approving hum at the word value. Elias leaned in. It's not just hoarding. It's curating. And possibly bonding behavior. The king stared. Bonding? The dragon, as if hearing its cue, stepped closer to Harold again. Not the king. Not the council. Harold. It nudged his arm lightly. Then nudged his coat pocket. Harold sighed under his breath. Don't start. Too late. The dragon gently tugged at his sleeve until he didn't resist. Then, with unmistakable intention, it curled partially around him. Not tightly. Not restraining. Claiming. The room collectively lost the ability to speak. One advisor whispered, it's attached to him. Harold, still very much aware of 70 eyes on him, said quietly, yes. I've noticed. The dragon made a pleased sound. Elias looked between them. Captain. I think you're its chosen horde. Harold gave him a tired look. That's not a thing. Elias replied, it is now. The king rubbed his temples. So let me understand this correctly. A dragon broke into my vault, stole half my treasury, broke into my gallery, stole my crown. He gestured weakly at the dragon still holding it, and now it's attached itself to my captain. The dragon gave a soft chirp at the word captain, as if recognizing it. Harold closed his eyes briefly. That's broadly accurate. A long silence followed. Then the king spoke again, slower this time. Is it dangerous? Elias answered carefully. Potentially. But it has shown no aggression unless provoked. The dragon immediately nudged Harold again, as if to confirm this was true. Harold muttered, that doesn't mean I'm its property. The dragon gave a sound that very much suggested disagreement. The king leaned forward. What does it want? Elias opened his mouth. Closed it. Then tried again. Shiny things. The king blinked. Elias added, and, apparently Captain Vance. Harold immediately turned his head. No. The dragon made a soft, offended hiss. Then placed the king's crown gently on Harold's shoulder like it had already decided the matter. The council erupted into overlapping arguments. Is this diplomatic contact? Is it a threat? Can we weaponize it? Why is it affectionate toward him specifically? Through it all, Harold stood still while a juvenile emboing dragon casually wrapped itself around his arm like a possessive shadow that had decided ownership was emotional rather than territorial. Finally, Elias raised his voice. Everyone stop. Silence slowly returned. Elias pointed at the dragon. It's not attacking. It's not rampaging. It's not even resisting containment. It is demonstrating selection-based attachment behavior tied to reflective and valuable objects. He paused. And Captain Vance. Harold gave him a look that promised consequences later. Elias ignored it. If we forcefully separate them, we risk provoking defensive instincts. If we allow it to remain, we may have a cooperating apex predator that responds to one human. The king frowned. You're suggesting we negotiate? Harold exhaled. We are already negotiating. The king stared at him. How? Harold glanced down at the dragon, which was now lightly tugging at his glove like a cat deciding it had found home. Poorly, he said. The dragon gave a soft, satisfied sound. Then leaned its head briefly against his arm. As if sealing the agreement. And in that moment, the kingdom of Eldermire reached an uncomfortable conclusion. They had not caught the thief. They had been selected by it. And worse. It had excellent taste.